Welcome to Whisperwave ASMR Storytime. You're safe here. This is your moment to slow down, to listen, and let your imagination drift gently into another world. Tonight, or whenever you're ready, you'll hear the story of a quiet village, a secret garden, and the clockmaker who waited for time to bring someone home. So get cozy. Let your breath settle, and let the story begin. The village was always quiet at dawn. Cobblestone streets glistened from the night mist, and soft golden light trickled down from the eastern hills. No footsteps yet, no carts rolling, only the hush of wind weaving through wooden shutters, and the occasional breath of morning fog curling under doorways. At the edge of the village stood a house no one dared visit, not out of fear, but out of reverence. They called it the clockmaker's house. Its windows never lit up at night. Its garden grew wild, a tangle of ivy, old roses, and tall sunflowers that turned their heads even when the sun was gone. And behind the garden gate, stories whispered in the breeze. They said he was still in there, the old clockmaker, though no one had seen him for years. Elena had always been curious. She'd heard the stories from her grandmother, of clocks that ticked without gears, of roses that bloomed in winter, of music that came from the ground like memory. And so, on this particular morning, with fog still thick on the hills, she slipped through the garden gate. The air was warm, unexpectedly so. The flowers rustled, as though they noticed her, as though they'd been waiting. She stepped lightly, brushing her fingers along soft petals. A bell rang softly in the distance, not from the house, but from the garden itself. It sounded like a welcome. And then, from behind the sunflowers, she saw him. Not old, not young. Eyes like polished silver. Hands covered in dust and time. The clockmaker. "You're late," he whispered, smiling without surprise. Elena blinked. "I didn't know I was coming. No one ever does." Elena stood still, not out of fear, but as if moving too quickly might break the moment. The clockmaker turned, his coat brushing the tall grass. He didn't ask her to follow. He simply walked, slowly. Something in her heart told her to walk too. They moved past a crooked archway where ivy curled like delicate fingers. Stone steps led down into a hollow space. And there, tucked away beneath the roots of an ancient oak, was a workshop. Not made of wood, not of glass, but of time. Elena couldn't quite explain how she knew, but she did. The walls shimmered slightly like rippling water. Shelves floated without touching the walls. Dozens of clocks ticked gently, but not in unison. Each one had its own rhythm, its own voice. Some ticked like distant rainfall. Others pulsed like soft heartbeats. One whispered with every swing of its pendulum, "Remember, remember." The clockmaker turned to her and said, "These are not clocks. Not really. They are moments." Elena tilted her head. "Moments." He nodded. "Every tick holds a memory, every talk, a feeling someone once forgot." He stepped forward and placed a hand on a large brass dial. It glowed under his touch. "This one," he murmured, "is the first laugh of a child who hadn't spoken in weeks. Tick. This one, the last sigh of someone who had loved deeply. Talk." Elena felt her eyes sting with something she didn't understand. And somewhere deep inside her, something shifted. The clockmaker led her to a small table by the window. There was tea, still warm, 2 cups. He motioned for her to sit. "Why me?" she asked quietly. He smiled, eyes soft like morning mist. smelled like rain on stone and old paper, and something sweet she couldn't name. She took a sip, warm, bright, like drinking a memory you didn't know you'd lost. The clockmaker sat across from her, watching the sky through the arched window. Outside, the garden shimmered, each leaf catching light in slow motion, as though the sun had paused for just them. "You keep all these moments," she said, running a finger along the edge of the wooden table. "But why?" The clockmaker didn't answer right away. Instead, he opened a small drawer from the wall behind him. From it, he pulled a tiny golden key. He placed it gently on the table between them. "For someone like you," he said softly, "it's not about keeping. It's about remembering." He turned toward the far corner of the workshop. There, beneath a crystal dome, sat a clock unlike the others. It didn't tick. It breathed. With each rise and fall, its gears glowed faintly. A heartbeat made of brass and time. Helena stood, drawn to it. The air around it felt soft, like dusk. And as she reached the glass, she saw something inside the clock's face. A garden. Not just any garden, but her garden. The one from her childhood. She gasped. Quietly. There were her mother's red gloves, the crooked wooden bench, and even the little cat she'd named Moonleaf. But this was... She turned to him. He simply nodded. "Moments remember you too." Her chest ached in the most gentle way. Not from sadness, but from rediscovery. And for the first time in a long time, Elena let herself feel everything. The moment lingered in her chest like a soft lantern light, not bright enough to blind, just enough to warm. Elena stepped closer to the dome. Inside, her childhood moved like a memory played in slow motion. The swing that creaked, the breeze that rustled jasmine vines. She saw herself, a little girl again, laughing with bare feet in the grass. She reached out, but her hand paused just above the glass. The warmth of it pulsed softly, as if saying, "It's not for touching, just for remembering." The clockmaker stood beside her now, his coat still smelling faintly of cedar and thyme. "She's still in there," he said, referring to the girl. "She never left. She only waited for you to notice." Elena turned away from the dome, back toward the workshop. But something was changing. The walls around her shifted gently. The room opened wider, the clocks pulling back into shadow. In their place, a path of wooden steps, lined with low lanterns, leading downward. "Where does it go?" she asked. "To the garden," he replied. "But isn't this the garden?" The clockmaker smiled. This was just the gate. And so, without fear, Elena stepped onto the first stair. Each step was soft. Not wood, not stone. Something in between. Like pressed earth wrapped in memory. The light dimmed. Not with darkness, but with hush. The deeper she went, the more she heard. Not noise, but feeling. The sound of water that hadn't yet reached the stream. The rustle of leaves before the wind touched them. Moments before moments. And finally, at the bottom of the path, the garden opened. Not the tidy rose of her childhood. Not the one under glass. This was wilder. Alive. The garden was bathed in silver light. Not moonlight. Not quiet. It felt softer than that, as though the stars had gathered their shimmer and laid it gently across every petal and leaf. Helena stepped into the grass. It reached her knees and brushed her skin like the softest memory. Familiar, but almost Somewhere to the left, a stream whispered to itself. Not rushing, just moving, like a lullaby for the stones. Tiny lamps no taller than a candle glowed beside the path. Each one flickered as she passed, recognizing her. She walked on, deeper, calmer. Her breath slowed. Her thoughts dissolved into the soil beneath her. In the center of the garden, a willow tree stood. Its branches swept the ground like veils of soft silk, and its trunk shimmered faintly, as though stitched with threads of time. Elena stepped beneath its branches and sat on the cool earth. Above her, the leaves whispered, and she felt the echoes in her chest. The tree knew her. It remembered every version of her. The girl with scraped knees, the teenager hiding in books, the woman who had forgotten how to pause. And beneath the willow, time finally stopped. Not broken, not rushed, just still. The way tea settles at the bottom of a cup. The way silence feels when it wraps around your shoulders. Elena let her hands rest in the grass. She didn't need to speak. The garden listened, and the garden replied. The willow's roots reached out, curling gently beneath the earth. Elena could feel them, not with her skin, but somewhere deeper. A quiet awareness. She leaned back against the trunk. It was warm, alive. She imagined it breathing with her, in and out, slow, steady. In the hush beneath the canopy, she saw things, not with her eyes, but with that same still place where dreams live. She saw a boy, the clockmaker's younger self, running through this very garden. He was laughing, chasing light that danced just out of reach. And then, the boy grew. He sat under the tree just as she was now, carving pieces of time into little brass gears. Patient hands, bright eyes, a quiet wonder. The garden had held him, just as it now held her. She felt the echo of his thoughts, the weight of time gently pressing, not harshly, just present. And then, a glimmer of sound. Tiny chimes, barely there, ringing like snowflakes brushing glass. Elena looked down. Beside her, nestled in the grass, was a small silver locket. Its surface was edged with leaves and stars, and it pulsed with a soft inner glow. She reached out and touched it. It opened. Inside, not a photo, but a flicker of memory. Not hers, but it welcomed her anyway. A quiet cottage, a firelit room, a clockmaker humming as he worked, a girl, wide-eyed and curious, watching him from the corner, and the scent of tea and lavender. Elena closed the locket and held it to her chest. The warmth sank into her. It didn't answer questions. It didn't need to. It simply reminded her she was part of this. Always had been. The garden rustled, the leaves shifting softly, as if to say, "You're ready now." And so, Helena stood. Light pooled around her feet, gathering like dawn. She took a breath. The next path was waiting. The light beneath Elena's feet shimmered and curved, forming a narrow path of golden dust. It wound through the trees, silent and glowing, as if the garden itself had painted it just for her. She followed it. Step by step, the world around her shifted. Not suddenly, but like waking from one dream into another. The trees thinned again, their trunks stretched taller, their leaves softening into mist. Ahead, arches of stone rose from the earth, weathered and ancient, each one edged with quiet symbols, spirals, moons, open palms. She walked beneath them, each arch whispering faint echoes of memory. The first, laughter, a child's voice, ringing like a bell on a spring morning. The second, a song, half remembered, yet oddly familiar, woven through with warmth and longing. The third, To her left, a small pool rested between stones. Its surface rippled without wind. She knelt beside it. And when she looked in, she didn't see her reflection. Instead, the water showed her a single moment. A quiet evening in her old home. Tea in her hands, the ticking of a clock nearby, a storm tapping at the window. That stillness, that comfort. She had forgotten it. Now it returned. Not as longing, but as truth. She carried it with her as she stood. Not behind her, but inside her. Beyond the arches, the golden path led to a low hill. At the top stood a gate made of starlight. Its frame shimmered with shifting patterns. Not fixed, but always becoming. Elena stepped closer. The gate pulsed gently, as though it recognized her. She didn't knock. She didn't need to. The gate opened on its own, and beyond it, a world of soft skies, floating lanterns, and a sound like pages turning in a distant book. She took one step forward. Elena stepped through the starlit gate. The air changed again, warmer, filled with the scent of aged paper and candle wax. Before her stretched a wide stone hall, lined with towering shelves carved from living wood. Each shelf cradled glowing orbs, each orb swirling with soft light. A library, but not of books, of memories. A figure appeared, not quite human, not quite light. It moved like a breeze given form, its face gentle, undefined. It beckoned. No words were needed. Elena followed. As they walked, the orbs hummed gently. Some glowed blue, others amber or rose gold. Each color, a feeling. Each hum, a story. They stopped before a single orb, resting in a silver cradle. The guide touched it and it opened like a flower. Images spilled out. A forest path lit by fireflies. A girl standing in the rain laughing. A room filled with clocks that ticked in harmony. Elena recognized them. Not from her life, but from the dream she'd long forgotten. The guide turned to her, not speaking, but asking, would she like to keep this? She nodded. The orb floated toward her and gently nestled against her chest. Warmth bloomed within her, as though a missing piece had returned home. They moved on. More orbs, more memories, some familiar, some strange, as if borrowed from the lives of others. One showed a ship sailing through clouds, another a child building stars from sand. And then they reached the end of the hall. A grand door stood there. It looked like wood but shimmered faintly, as if made of starlight and bark and dreams. The guide bowed. Not goodbye, but thank you. Elena placed her hand on the door. It opened. Beyond was not an ending. It was a beginning. A gentle wind met her, carrying the sound of a distant clock, steady and soft. The ticking of time, and the promise of more stories to come. She smiled, stepped forward, and let the next chapter begin. As Elena stepped through the shimmering door, the ground beneath her feet softened. No longer stone, but moss, thick and springy, warm with a subtle golden glow. She was standing at the top of a wide hill, looking down into a valley cradled between gentle mountains. It was dusk here, or dawn. The sky was painted with violets and pale oranges, and a quiet melody drifted on the air. Not music exactly, but more like echoes, of voices long silent, of lullabies once sung. She followed the path that led downward, into the folds of the valley. As she walked, the hum grew clearer, and then she saw them, in the open field below. Instruments floated gently in the air, harps made of wind and willow, drums shaped from riverstone, flutes carved from hollow reeds. None were played by hands, yet each produced sound, delicate, layered, warm. The music music wasn't loud. It didn't try to impress. It simply was, like the whisper of leaves, or the hush before sleep. In the center of the valley stood a tree, wide, ancient, silver bark. Its branches held wind chimes, woven from memory and string. As the breeze moved through, each chime sang a note. Elena sat beneath the tree. She closed her eyes and listened. And in the stillness she began to remember her grandmother's voice. A soft song sung while brushing her hair, the rhythm of her own heartbeat as a child. Pressed close to someone safe, a campfire. A song shared quietly with a friend. No lyrics, just feeling. The tree understood. Its branches lowered slightly, and from the air, a small wooden lyre drifted down to her lap. She didn't know how to play, and yet her fingers moved without thought. A melody emerged. Heron one, only she could make. Soft and slow, made from laughter, rain and longing. The instruments around her answered. Together they played her memory, her feeling, her truth. And when the song ended, Elena whispered a quiet thank you to the valley, to the music, to herself. The path ahead shimmered with golden dust. She stood, held the lyre close, and continued on. The golden dust beneath Elena's feet guided her forward, leading her beyond the valley of forgotten songs. As she walked, the world shifted again, not abruptly, but like a dream changing shape. The air turned cooler, tinged with the scent of old pages and laughter. A soft light bloomed ahead, pale and silver, like moonlight caught in mist. Before her stood a towering building made entirely of glass and vines. Its walls shimmered as if breathing. The doorway opened without a sound, welcoming her inside. She entered the library of moonlight. It was silent, but not empty. The silence here felt sacred, like the hush before a story begins. Shelves reached high above her, spiraling like trees, filled with books that whispered when passed. Each book glowed faintly, not from ink or paper, but from memory. She walked slowly, fingers brushing spines as she passed. Each one pulsed softly, as if recognizing her presence. In the center of the room sat a table, round and smooth like a moonstone. On it was a single open book, its pages blank, waiting. The lyre she carried from the valley rested itself on the table, and the air shimmered. Words began to appear on the blank page. They formed slowly, not written, but remembered. The story it told was hers. Moments from childhood, dreams once whispered into pillows, quiet triumphs, secret fears that had melted in kindness. Elena said, and the book turned pages on its own, each one a gentle unveiling, not judgmental, not rushed, just remembering. She smiled, because sometimes to remember is to return, to gather pieces, to become whole again. When the last page had turned, the book closed softly. The shelves around her dimmed, as though bowing in acknowledgement. And before her, a new door appeared, shaped from woven stars, framed by ivy. Elena stood, heart full. She took the book gently, now sealed with a silver thread, and placed it beside her lyre. As she stepped through the doorway, a single phrase echoed behind her. Not spoken, but felt. You are made of story, and your story is beautiful. The starlit door whispered closed behind Elena, and she stepped into quiet darkness. Not the kind that hides or frightens, but the kind that wraps around you like velvet. Deep, safe, endless. Above her, a single star blinked, then another, and then a cascade of them, unfolding into a slow spiral of light. Before her eyes, a staircase began to form, of stardust and time. Elena looked up. The stairs curved gently into the sky, disappearing into a glowing mist. Without hesitation, she placed one foot onto the first step. It held her weight like a promise. She began to climb. With every step, a soft tone rang out. A note of music, as if each star was singing its name. The air around her was weightless. She felt like a feather drifting upward, drawn not by effort, but by purpose. As she rose, vision shimmered beside the staircase. Memories from other lives. Places she had never been, but somehow knew. A golden meadow with bells that bloomed. A silver sea that never touched land. A city built on floating islands, where people wore dreams like clothing. Each vision passed like a soft breeze. They didn't distract her. They reminded her. She was part of something vast, timeless. Halfway up, she paused. A bench of clouds formed beside the steps. She sat catching her breath, though her body wasn't tired. She simply wanted to feel the moment. The hush of the sky, the warmth of the stars. From here, the world below looked peaceful, like a painting brushed with love. She thought of the book in her satchel, sealed with silver thread, and the lyre that now hummed quietly at her side, always in tune with her heart. When she stood again, the staircase welcomed her, and up she went, step by glowing step. At the top of the stairs, the mist parted. A single gate of light stood waiting. Its surface shimmered like water and fire all at once. Behind it, something called. Not a voice, but a knowing. Elena reached out, and the gate opened without a sound. Beyond the gate, Elena stepped into a world that was both familiar and strange. A garden, yes, but one unlike any she had ever seen. The flowers here did not sway in the breeze. They shimmered with a quiet pulse of their own, as if they had their own heartbeat. Each petal seemed to whisper something in a language only the soul could understand. The sky above was painted with the softest hues, a gentle twilight of violet and rose, where the stars flickered softly, like faraway lanterns held by unseen hands. And in the distance there was a tower, its silhouette made of silver mist, rising gently into the sky, as if cradled by the very air itself. Elena stepped forward, her footsteps silent upon the soft, lush ground. The garden stretched out in all directions, endless and inviting, filled with paths that wound through the trees, their branches adorned with glowing fruits. A breeze passed, carrying the scent of sweet honey and fresh rain. It was the kind of air that made her want to breathe deeply, to take in every moment, to savor each second like the rarest of treasures. As she walked, the ground beneath her began to hum, a quiet vibration that echoed from the earth itself, not loud, but soothing. The trees seemed to nod in greeting as she passed, their trunks glowing softly, as if the trees too recognized her presence. And overhead the stars began to swirl, dancing slowly in a celestial waltz. In the center of the garden stood a stone bench, its surface carved with delicate patterns, spirals and stars and leaves. Elena sat down upon it, feeling the smooth coolness of the stone beneath her, and for the first time, she allowed herself to rest, to simply be. Her eyes closed, and she listened. The garden was alive, but not in the way most things are alive. There was no rush, no clamor of urgent movement. This place was still, but filled with a quiet kind of energy. A hum of waiting, of knowing. The song of the garden was soft, a gentle melody woven into the wind. The sound of the stars, the rustling of the leaves, and the distant murmur of the silver river she had crossed earlier. Elena felt her heart beat whose skin shimmered like moonlight, and whose hair was woven with vines and stars. She smiled softly, as though she had been waiting for this moment for longer than time itself. The woman stepped forward, her voice a soft whisper that echoed in Elena's mind. "Welcome home." The old woman's eyes glowed, not with fire, but with memory, like she had seen every dawn, every dream, and still held space for one more. Elena stood slowly from the stone bench, her breath gentle, her heart quiet and listening. The garden song faded to a hush as the keeper stepped closer. Time seemed to slow, not in delay, but in reverence. "You have walked the path of wonder," the keeper said, her voice like wind through silk, "and you have listened with your whole being." Elena could not speak, not from fear, but from awe. Words would have shattered the stillness. The keeper reached into the folds of her robe and pulled out something small, wrapped in leaves and golden threads. She placed it in Elena's hand. It was warm. It pulsed softly in her palm. A tiny clockwork heart. Its gears spun in slow rhythm, ticking not with seconds, but with moments. "This," the keeper whispered, "is a seed. It will not grow in earth, but in memory, in silence, in stillness." Elena looked down at the delicate creation, and though it was silent to the ear, she could hear it, feel it, beat in harmony with her breath. "It will remind you," the keeper continued, "that time is not always measured in minutes. Sometimes it's found in the way the stars blink, or how a breeze curls around your fingers." A gentle wind passed between them. It carried petals from the flowering trees, each one spinning like a tiny dancer through the air. "And what do I do with it?" Elena finally asked, her voice soft and unsure. "You carry it," said the keeper, "and when the world outside rushes, when the noise grows too loud, you'll remember the garden, and your heart will return here." The words wrapped around Elena like a shawl. She felt them settle in her chest, warm and comforting. The keeper began to fade, not vanish, but become part of the air, the trees, the soil. She smiled as she dissolved, as if saying, "I'm always here." Elena stood in the garden alone again, but she no longer felt alone. The garden pulsed gently around her, and the heart in her hand glowed like a quiet star. Elena held the tiny clockwork heart close to her chest. Its warmth seeped into her palms, then deeper, into her ribs, her breath, her thoughts. The garden, once filled with drifting petals and glowing trees, now shimmered with a new kind of light, one that came from within her. She turned slowly, the soft earth underfoot sighing with each step. The path that had led her here was no longer stone or soil, but threads of light, woven like a tapestry across the ground. Each step forward awakened a memory. A silver leaf brushing her shoulder, a soft bench carved with stars, the quiet laughter of the fountain's water, and the whispers, always the whispers, guiding, gentle, steady. As she walked, the garden began to dim, not in sadness, but in rest. The colors softened to moonlight tones. The glow of lanterns blinked slower, like eyes closing in peaceful sleep. She passed the silver tree once more. Its branches bowed slightly, as if saying farewell. Or, perhaps, until next time. The bridge of light returned beneath her feet. It greeted her gently, remembering her steps. As she crossed the lake, the water below stilled, reflecting not the stars this time, but her own glowing outline. She paused at the center, looked out, and whispered, "Thank you." The words echoed softly, not loud, but true. The lake shimmered in reply, beyond the garden's entrance. wildflowers meant soft dusk. The air changed once more. She stepped through the veil of vines and felt the coolness of her world return. The hush of night. The weight of a blanket waiting on her bed. The silence of a room that remembered her absence. She sat, then lay down, and in her hand, the clockwork heart still pulsed. Not loudly, not insistently, but just enough. It beat in rhythm with the garden and the stars, and her breath. And as her eyes closed, she knew she could return any time. All it took was stillness. The room was quiet. Outside her window, the moon hung low, casting soft silver shapes onto the walls. Elena, wrapped in her blanket, lay still with the clockwork heart resting near her pillow. Its pulse had slowed, not stopped, but softened, as if it too had drifted into sleep. And in that space between waking and dreaming, Elena found herself somewhere new. Not quite the garden, not quite her room, but a space between. She stood in a meadow painted with stardust, grass that shimmered with every breath of wind, and skies that turned gently from dusk to dawn and back again, without ever settling on either. Ahead, a small structure stood, a house made of light wood and moss-covered stone, its roof shaped like a gentle curve, almost like a smile. Smoke curled from the chimney, sweet and slow. She stepped closer. Inside, the cottage was warm, lit by candles with golden flames that flickered in time with her breath. Books lined the walls. Not ordinary books, but journals bound in velvet. Each one labeled not with a title, but with feelings. The day I felt like the sun, when silence became a friend. The first time I heard my own laughter. Elena reached for one. As her fingers touched the spine, it whispered open. Inside, there were no words, only images, soft and glowing. Moments lived, but nearly forgotten. A gentle voice echoed in the cottage. This is where your memories rest, until you are ready to feel them again. She turned to see no one, and yet felt deeply seen. A seat beside the fire waited for her. She sat. The chair embraced her shape, and the fire spoke, not with sound, but with warmth. It told her stories, of stars born in quiet moments, of laughter carried on the wind, of tears that watered gardens unseen. Elena closed her eyes, and the fire wrapped her in its light. This place was not the garden, and not her home. It was a dream of both, a meeting point for the heart and the soul. Here she was not learning, not searching. She was simply remembering what it felt like to belong. The fire faded into embers, its warmth settling in Elena's chest like a quiet hum. She stood, and as she turned, the velvet books along the walls began to glow. One by one, they floated gently from their shelves, opening in midair, pages turning on their own. They didn't make a sound, only the soft flutter of stories remembered. Helena walked slowly through the floating pages. Each one brushed her fingertips like butterfly wings. She didn't need to read them. She felt them. One page reminded her of the first time she saw snow, how it tasted like clouds and mystery. Another held the laughter of someone long gone, a memory so gentle, it brought both warmth and ache. Then, a page drifted down in front of her. This one shimmered gold at the edges. It showed her the garden. Not just as it had been, but as it would become. She saw herself walking with the old clockmaker, their paths winding into the unknown, new trees blooming behind their steps, new clocks ticking with unfamiliar tunes. She saw children playing beneath the golden leaves, books growing from vines, lanterns floating through skies that never darkened, a garden that grew from stories. Elena pressed the glowing page to her heart. For door she hadn't noticed before. It wasn't grand, just wood and brass, with a handle shaped like a question mark. She stepped toward it. Her hand touched the cool metal. It tingled. Behind the door she could hear ticking, like the garden clocks, but layered. 100 rhythms moving together in slow, soft harmony. She opened the door and stepped through. The door closed behind her without a sound. Elena found herself standing in a narrow hallway. Its walls curved gently inward, like the inside of a seashell. The floor was smooth stone, cool beneath her bare feet, and the ceiling above glimmered faintly, as if stars had taken root there. She walked forward, slowly. Each step awakened a soft chime from beneath the floor, as though the path itself was playing a melody just for her. The air was different here. Not warm, not cold, but filled with presence. She heard nothing, and yet everything. A hush that seemed to carry the memories of laughter, the breath of tears, the hush of lullabies once whispered in the dark. This place held echoes, not loud or haunting, but kind. Gentle shadows of sound that had once mattered. Elena paused at a point where the hallway widened. A mirror stood there, tall and oval, framed in twisting silver vines. But when she looked into it, she didn't see herself. Not exactly. She saw a younger version of her, sitting in the garden, reading by candlelight, a cup of tea beside her, eyes wide with wonder, heart full. Then the image changed to an older her, peacefully tending to the vines, a child by her side, laughing as she passed a petal to the wind. Elena placed a hand on the glass. It was warm. She smiled, and the mirror dissolved into mist. From the mist, a voice came. Soft, steady, familiar. You are the garden now. Not a question, a truth. The hallway ahead shimmered, opening into light. Not harsh light, not blinding. Just welcome. She stepped forward, feeling each memory rise gently to greet her. Not clinging, but blessing. And as she moved toward the light, the gentle ticking grew louder. Not rushed, but rhythmic. Time was not chasing her. It was walking with her. As Elena stepped through the shimmering light, her breath caught softly in her chest. The space before her was round, endless, yet comforting in its shape. The walls were neither stone nor wood, but something softer, almost like parchment made of mist. Tiny flecks of silver floated in the air, drifting lazily as if time itself were sleeping. In the center of the room was a pedestal. On it, a bowl, clear, glass-like, cradled by roots that curled around it protectively. Elena approached. Inside the bowl, stars, tiny living stars, no brighter than candle flames, each one pulsing gently. And with every pulse, she heard something. Not words, not voices, but feelings, longings, wishes. One shimmered blue and pulsed with the ache of a journey unfinished. Another golden, hummed with a wish for someone who had once been far, but now perhaps was near again. Elena's hands hovered above the bowl. She didn't need to touch them. She only had to listen. A lilac-colored light pulsed once, and her breath caught. That one was hers. A wish she'd made long ago. A whisper from childhood. A quiet, unspoken longing for a place where the world would be still. Where breath came easily. Where the heart could rest without worry. And here she was. The star drifted upward, spinning gently before her eyes. Elena smiled. The star burst. Not loudly, not sharply, but in a bloom of soft sparkles, like dandelion seeds kissed by sunlight. And where the star had been, a new flower appeared at her feet. Soft petals. A center that glowed faintly. Warm warmth rising from it like love remembered. The walls of the room began to change, from mist to soft color, like paintings forming as she watched. Each one, a memory. Each one, a place she had belonged. A library in spring. A quiet walk under rain-soaked leaves. A candlelit dinner with laughter blooming like wild roses. And then, a picture that had not yet happened. Her, standing at the edge of the garden. A smile on her lips. Her hands open to the sky. And behind her, the clock tower. Whole again. Waiting. Ticking. Welcoming. She turned toward the archway on the other side of the room. The stars behind her pulsed once more. Not to call her back, but to thank her for remembering. Elena stepped gently through the archway beyond the bowl of stars. Her feet met a floor blanketed in soft golden leaves, the edges curling slightly as if they had just fallen. Yet there was no wind, no rustle, only stillness. The hall before her was long and narrow, lined with tall trees, whose trunks shimmered in twilight colors. They reached up through the ceilingless sky, branches touching stars. Each tree bore leaves of different hues, not just greens and golds, but deep sapphire, rose pink, and shades of silver. Elena walked slowly. With each step, a leaf would drift down beside her, and as it touched the ground, a memory would rise. Not hers, others. A woman's soft laughter on a balcony, a boy running barefoot through dewy grass, an old man humming while shaping wood. Moments. Echoes of lives gently suspended in the space between dreams and time. And then, Elena saw her own leaf fall. It floated lazily, light as a breath, before landing before her feet. She crouched beside it, the moment it touched her palm. A warmth spread through her chest. She saw herself, not now, but younger, drawing circles in the dirt with a stick, waiting for someone to come home, and the way she had imagined a garden to grow from that very spot. It had, in a way she never expected. Elena pressed the leaf gently to her chest, and it vanished like dust in sunlight. She walked on. At the end of the hall, the trees grew taller still. Their roots braided across the ground like the lines of an old map. A single bench stood in a patch of dappled light, and above it, a tree whose leaves turned from one color to the next in a slow, mesmerizing rhythm. She sat, and for a while, time held her. No need to search, no need to ask. The hall breathed with her, and she knew. Some journeys aren't about where you go, but about how softly you return to what you once loved. The leaves above rustled, not with wind, but with welcome. The light beneath the shifting leaves dimmed gently, like the sigh of a lantern before sleep. Elena stood again, her hands relaxed at her sides, and ahead, she saw them, a stairwell carved from moonstone, spiraling downward into a place wrapped in hush. She stepped lightly, the stairs humming underfoot with every touch. Not a tune, just a vibration, like the purring of something ancient and kind. The air cooled as she descended. The walls began to shimmer with symbols, etched in gold, flickering with soft energy. Each symbol seemed to pulse as she passed, as though whispering to her, not with words, but with meaning. She didn't need to understand. She only needed to feel. Halfway down the spiral, the staircase widened into a landing shaped like a shell. There, in the center, stood a stone pedestal. On it rested a bowl of clear water, still as glass, but inside, stars swam, tiny lights moving like gentle fish. She leaned over the bowl, and her reflection blinked back at her. Not the Elena she saw every day, but the version of her that dreamed. The one who waited patiently inside all this time. The water her stirred, not by her hand, but by something unseen. And as it did, the stars within formed shapes. A path, a place, a wish. It was hers, unspoken but understood. A deep longing not for change, but for return. Not to a place, but to the feeling she once knew. Of being seen, of being still. She reached out and touched the water. A single ripple. A soft warmth that spread from her fingertips to her heart. And a voice, barely audible, but unmistakably kind, whispered, "You are the wish." Tears welled gently, not from sorrow, but release. She turned from the pedestal and continued downward, each step lighter than the last, as though the stairwell now knew she belonged. Down into quiet, down into light, down into the place where all wishes rest, until they are ready to become real. The final step of the moonstone stair melted into soft moss. Elena stepped down, and the walls opened into stillness. She stood at the edge of a round chamber, not large, but infinite in feeling. The ceiling arched above her like the inside of a seashell, lined with soft pearls of light that pulsed like slow heartbeats. The floor glowed gently beneath her, alive with shifting patterns. Not random, but rhythmic, like memories floating just below the surface. In the center of the chamber was a single chair, hand-carved from driftwood, smoothed by time and touch. She walked toward it, guided not by light, but by a feeling. A subtle tug, like home calling her back as she sat. The room exhaled, the air grew warmer, and the walls began to move. Not physically, but in feeling. They curled inward with glowing images, soft, slow echoes of her own life, moments she had forgotten. A laugh on a summer afternoon, a quiet corner of a library. The way it felt to hold a hand without needing to speak. Each memory unfolded like a petal. And Elena, instead of watching, began to feel them again. Not as a rush, but a wave. Gentle. Deliberate. She breathed slowly, allowing each one to rise and drift away again. She realized something in that room. She wasn't collecting memories. She was returning them, giving them rest, letting them breathe on their own. And as she did, the images softened, not vanishing, but nesting quietly back into the chamber's walls, as if they knew she had made peace with them. The light above her dimmed to a soft blue, like twilight on the edge of sleep, and the room whispered to her, not in language, but in knowing. You are not made of moments lost. You are shaped by all you've carried, and everything you've loved. Elena closed her eyes, and for the first time in a long time, she felt light. She stood slowly, the chamber holding her in silence. A farewell, a thank you, a pause between pages. She walked to a new door, one she hadn't seen before. Its handle was warm. Its hinge made no sound. She opened it and stepped through. The door closed quietly behind her. Not a final sound, more like the end of a breath. Elena stood in a narrow corridor, lit only by natural light streaming in through high open slats in the walls. The wind moved through them like a song with no words. Soft, whirling, tender. She stepped forward and the floor beneath her shifted underfoot, not unstable but alive, like the surface of a drum, stretched tight with music. Each step sent a tone into the air, a different note, a quiet melody that followed her. She realized she was walking through sound. The corridor curved gently, never sharp, never sudden. And on the walls, just beneath the slats, hung chimes made of all things. Shells, leaves, pieces of broken glass, tiny bones and feathers. Each one caught the breeze differently. Each one spoke in its own voice. The sounds never clashed. They wove together, wasn't music in the way she knew it. It was older, more honest. She paused beneath one of the slats, let the wind catch strands of her hair, and smiled. She could hear laughter. Not around her, but inside her. Laughter from years ago. A memory of spinning barefoot in the rain, of being unafraid of mud, of forgetting what time was. And in that moment, she didn't try to name the feeling. She just felt it. She kept walking. Further down the corridor, the wind grew cooler. Not cold, just crisp. A new kind of awake. Light poured in from the end of the hall, a soft golden hue, like morning beginning again. She reached the edge. The corridor ended at a balcony, wide, round, open to a sky she hadn't seen in years. And from it, a view that pulled the breath from her chest gently, like a hand smoothing wrinkles from a cloth. Mountains rose and fell like sleeping giants. Rivers stitched the land in silver ribbons, and floating through the air, petals, like soft embers, carried endlessly by the wind. Elena stood there, quiet, still, and the wind circled her, not rushing, but welcoming, like it had been waiting just for her. Elena stepped onto the balcony, the stone beneath her feet warm from sunlight, softened by the whisper of wind-polished moss. She took a breath, not just to fill her lungs, but to remember how it felt, to breathe in wonder, to taste the edge of magic that danced on the air. Before her, a bridge arched away from the balcony, not made of stone or wood, but of vines, thick and blooming, woven with petals and glimmers of dew that sparkled like stars. It didn't seem to be built. It had grown there, patiently, waiting for her. She stepped onto it. The bridge swayed gently, but not in a way that unsettled, more like being rocked in the arms of the sky. Below her was not ground, but clouds, thick and golden, rolling in slow motion like the sea at sunrise. She looked out. The horizon shimmered. Mountains rose like ancient cathedrals. But far below, as if the world had fallen away. It was as if she had stepped into a place above reality, where time was slower, softer. The bridge led her to a floating island, cradled in the air, nestled among the clouds. It was a garden, but not like the one she'd walked before. This one felt sacred, wilder, as if it had grown from dreams themselves. Trees with silver trunks and glass-like leaves swayed without wind. Flowers sang when touched by light, and in the center of the garden stood a single tree, taller than the rest, its bark glowing with faint threads of gold. She walked to it. Its roots rose from the earth like sculpture, cradling a small pool of still water, clear, but impossibly deep. Helena knelt beside it, peered in. The surface did not reflect her face, but her memories. Moments she had long tucked away. Not because they hurt, but because life had rushed too quickly past them. A hug from her mother. The first time she read a story and wept. A snowfall. A spark of laughter at midnight. The tree pulse beside her. Not bright, not loud, just steady, reassuring. She touched the surface of the water, and it didn't ripple. Instead, it opened, and she saw, not a vision, but a door inside her. One she hadn't dared to knock on in years. She didn't open it yet. She just sat, beneath the glowing tree, held by the air, surrounded by stars in bloom. And she rested there, in the garden above the world. And as Elena closed her eyes beneath the golden tree, the garden sighed with her, a soft, loving exhale. The petals around her curled like fingers in sleep. The sky above faded to a deep velvet blue, dusted with stars that blinked like memories. She needed nothing more, not time, not answers. Just the hush of leaves and the rhythm of her breath, matching the heartbeat of the earth. No need to speak. Only breath. Only peace. Only now. You are home. You are safe. You are loved. Welcome to stillness.